You're standing in a basement unit in Cleveland, water-stained ceiling, carpet that smells like 1987. The tenant just texted saying the furnace died. Again, you bought this house for $47,000 3 years ago. You thought one rental property would mean passive income. What you didn't know then, what nobody tells you at level one, is that owning 100 doors doesn't mean you escaped. It means you built a machine, and every machine needs someone inside it, keeping it alive. Real estate is sold as freedom. Buy a property, rent it out, collect checks while you sleep. The Instagram version, the seminar version, the version that leaves out the 2 a.m. basement floods, the eviction hearings, the property tax appeals, the contractor who ghosts you mid-job. But there's a real path, a system that works. It's just not the one they show you. This is the journey from one rental property to 100 doors, 6 levels, each one a different game with different rules, different economics, different breaking points. You'll start as an accidental landlord managing your own toilets. You'll end as the architect of a portfolio worth $18 million, with 12 people depending on you, 4 lenders watching you, and one decision that could collapse everything. The truth is at the top, but you have to climb through every level to understand why it exists. You are 28 years old. You just bought your first property, a single-family home in a B-minus neighborhood. Not the worst street, not the best. The kind of place where people mow their lawns most weeks and the police show up occasionally but not often. Purchase price, $87,000. You put down $17,400, 20%. The mortgage is $520 a month. Renting it for $1,150. You did the math on a spreadsheet. After the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and a 10% vacancy reserve you read about in a Bigger Pockets forum, you're clearing $287 a month. That's $3. $444 a year. You tell people you're in real estate now. Here's what that actually means. You are the landlord, the property manager, the maintenance coordinator, and the customer service department. When the tenant calls about the leaking sink on a Thursday night, you're the one who drives over with a wrench you bought at Home Depot that morning and a YouTube tutorial pulled up on your phone. Never installed a faucet before. You figure it out. It takes you 2 hours. You don't charge yourself for the time because you're building equity, and equity is the whole point, right? 3 months in, the hot water heater dies. You get 3 quotes. The cheapest is $680 installed. That's 2.4 months of cash flow. Gone. You tell yourself it's part of the process. You're still making money. Technically, 6 months in, the tenant moves out. They gave you 30 days notice. But now the unit is empty, and it takes you 2 weeks to find someone new because you're doing everything yourself. You lose 12 days of rent, plus the carpet cleaning and fresh paint you did yourself. You are still cash flow positive on paper. Barely. But here's the part nobody talks about. If you tracked your time honestly, the drive time, the phone calls, the supply runs, the tenant showings, the late night repair jobs, you are working for $11.96 an hour. You are not an investor. You are an operator. You paid $17,400 to start a second job. You spend 6 months like this. Then you buy another property, a duplex this time, then another single family, then a small triplex. You hit 4 properties, then 7, then 9, managing everything from a spreadsheet and a spiral notebook in your truck. People at work call you a real estate investor. You like the way that sounds. What they don't see is that you're becoming a maintenance technician with a mortgage portfolio. And it works. For a while, until you run out of time. You are 31 years old. You own 9 rental properties. Total doors, 12. You still have your W-2 job, but you're spending 15 hours a week on the rentals. Nights, weekends. You are tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Your gross rent is $11,400 a month. But after all expenses and a real vacancy reserve, you're clearing $2,900 a month in actual cash. That's $34,800 a year. You've accumulated $340,000 in equity. On paper, you're winning, but you're working 2 jobs, and one of them never clocks out. You've learned things, how to screen tenants, how to navigate evictions, which contractors actually show up. You have a guy for plumbing, a guy for HVAC, They are mercenaries, and you do not have margin for error. Here's what breaks you at this level. The tenant in Unit 4 hasn't paid rent in 2 months. You file for eviction. The process takes 74 days. You lose $2,000 in unpaid rent, $1, $200 in legal fees, $890 in repairs. Total, $4,390. That's more than a year of profit from that property. Gone, you absorb it. You release, you keep going. But you're starting to realize rental real estate at small scale is a service business with all the fragility of a service business. One bad tenant can wipe out 4 months of profit. One furnace, one roof, you're underwater for the year. You're not building passive income. You're building a brittle system. You're sitting in your truck outside a property at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in January. It's 19 degrees, no heat. The HVAC contractor says maybe Thursday, maybe Friday. You're calculating losses. Or you go to Home Depot right now, buy a space heater, and drop it off yourself. You go to Home Depot. You sit in your truck afterward and realize you can't scale yourself. Can't add another 10 doors and keep showing up with space heaters. You either stop here or you build a system that doesn't require you to hold the wrench. That decision leads you to level 3. You've hired your first property manager. They charge 8% of gross rent plus leasing fees. It costs you $2,100 a month, but you think you just bought your time back. For the first time in 5 years, you are not the person who gets the midnight call. You get a monthly PDF report, occupancy rates, maintenance expenses, rent rolls. You feel like an actual investor. For 3 months, it works exactly like you imagined. Then you get the October report. 2 evictions in progress. 1 HVAC replacement you weren't warned about, $4,200. Water line repair, $1,890. Total unplanned expenses, $6,740. You didn't budget for any of it. You call your property manager. She explains very calmly that they manage 340 units. They do quarterly inspections unless there's a specific request. The HVAC system wasn't flagged because it was operational at the time. It died 2 weeks later. She's doing exactly what the contract says, which is not the same as what you assumed. Here's the thing about delegation. You thought you were handing off the work. You handed off the execution while keeping the responsibility. The property manager doesn't own the properties. They're not trying to maximize your return. They're trying to minimize their liability. Incentives aren't aligned. You're paying someone to care less than you do, but you also can't go back. You've tasted what it's like to not be on call. So you adapt. You're clearing $4,000 a month after management fees. Your portfolio is worth $1.9 million. You owe $1.3 million. You have $600, zero Zen in equity. And you quit your W-2 job, not because you're rich, but because you've made enough to survive, and you need the time to manage the system you've built. Your friends think you retired. You know better. You spend the next 18 months learning systems, lease templates reviewed by attorneys, maintenance logs, automation software. You switch property managers twice. You find one who's better, not perfect, better. Raise rents on 6 units. You buy another duplex, then a 4-unit, then 2 more single families. You're at 34 doors now. And you realize, need to stop thinking like someone who owns properties and start thinking like someone who owns a system. That means real scale, 50 doors minimum, which means new lenders. That's level 4. You are 36 years old, own 58 doors. You've crossed a line. You're now working with commercial lenders, not residential mortgages. This is not the same as a local bank application. This is balance sheets, trailing 12-month P&Ls, rent rolls, debt service coverage ratios, personal financial statements. You can walk in with a portfolio summary and a DSCR above 1.3, and you can get a $650,000 loan approved in 3 weeks. You've become bankable. You now have 4 different lenders, 3 loan structures, 2 properties with balloon payments due in 18 months that you'll need to refinance or pay off. You've signed personal guarantees on $2.1 million in debt. If the portfolio fails, they don't just take the buildings, they come for everything. You are all in now. Then interest rates rise 2.1% in 16 months. Have one adjustable rate loan. It resets in April. Your monthly payment increases by $790. Your cash flow on that property drops from $930 a month to $140 a month. You call the lender about refinancing. The appraisal comes in at $492,000. You owe $470,000. The numbers don't work. They won't do the loan. You're stuck. You realize real estate isn't just about finding good deals. It's about managing duration, interest rate risk, and capital structure. You're a portfolio manager now with a credit profile, a refinance calendar, a spreadsheet that tracks loan maturity dates, your finances, gross rent $48,200 a month, operating expenses $3,100 a month, net operating income $18,100, debt service $11,900 a month. Distributable cash flow, $6,200 a month. That's $74,400 a year. You also have $2.4 million in equity. On paper, you're crushing it, but equity doesn't pay for health insurance. Equity is a number that only becomes real if you sell or refinance. You're now dependent on lenders who can change terms, on property managers who control your reputation, on contractors you can't do without, on insurance companies who can kill a deal, on city councils who can pass rent control. A commercial lender slides a paper across the table. It's a rent audit. He's found 3 units under market by $150 a month each. He says, "You're leaving $5,400 a year on the table. If you want the next loan, I need to see tighter management." You go back to your property manager, tell them to raise the rents. 2 tenants push back, 1 leaves. You release at the higher rate. The lender approves the loan, and you realize you just changed someone's housing cost because a banker told you to, not because expenses went up. Because a lender needed to see that you operate like someone who maximizes revenue. You're not building freedom anymore. You're building a machine, and the machine is starting to run you. You've brought property management in-house. You're no longer paying 8% to an outside company. You've hired your own team, a full-time property manager, 52,000 plus benefits, 2 leasing agents, 1 maintenance supervisor who coordinates contractors, a bookkeeper, a lawyer on retainer, Don $2,500 a month, an insurance broker. You have an office, not a home office, a real office with desks and a conference room. You have a sign on the door. You are a CEO, gross rent, $96,700 a month, operating expenses, $52,100 a month, debt service, $28,400 a month. Distributable cash flow to you, $16,200 a month. That's $194,400 a year in cash. Your portfolio is worth $9.6 million. You owe $5.8 million. You have $3.8 million in equity. By any conventional measure, you've made it. You're in the top 2% of rental property owners by door count. But here's how the system actually works. You don't find deals anymore. They're brought to you. Don't manage tenants. You manage the people who manage tenants. You don't fix toilets. You approve capital expenditure requests. Your property manager tells you in March she's pregnant. She'll be out 12 weeks starting in July. You don't have a backup property manager. You are the backup. A tenant files a fair housing complaint. Leasing coordinator rejected the application because income didn't meet 3x rent. The applicant claims it was actually because their income came from Section 8, which is illegal in your state. You pull the file. You did everything right, but now you're in a legal process. You hire an attorney. It costs $8,300 over 4 months. You win, but it still cost you $8,300 and 12 hours of your time. Welcome to scale. A contractor asks for a raise in June, 27% increase. That's $4,600 more a year in volume. You want to negotiate, but you also know you don't have anyone else who knows your properties this well, who shows up, who doesn't upsell you. You say yes. You are no longer negotiating from strength. You're negotiating from dependency. A long-term tenant loses their job. They ask to defer rent for 2 months. You like them, believe them. But you also know, if you say yes, 2 other tenants will hear about it. You're not managing one decision. You're setting precedent across 87 doors. You offer a payment plan. Half rent for 2 months, then payback over 6 months. They say no. They move out. You release at $80 higher than they were paying. You were kind. You were also the system. And the system doesn't stop for individual circumstances. Here's what nobody tells you at this level. You're responsible for people. Your employees depend on you for health insurance, for steady paychecks. If you have a bad quarter, you can't absorb it quietly. You have to decide, do I cut hours? Do I dip into reserves? Do I delay my own draw? You're attending city council meetings now. There's a rent control proposal that would cap annual increases at 3%, but your operating expenses are rising at 5% a year. You've joined a landlord association. You're paying attention to legislation about eviction moratoriums, tenant rights, relocation assistance. Used to think politics didn't matter. Now you realize your entire business model is downstream of policy decisions made by people who've never owned a rental property. You've built something that works, but it only works if you keep feeding it. You can't take 6 months off. You can't sell half and coast. The debt service doesn't stop. The payroll doesn't stop. You're making $194,400 a year, working 50 hours a week. You have $3.8 million in equity you can't spend unless you sell or refinance. You're wealthy on paper, tired in real life, but you're close to 100 doors, close to the threshold where you're not just an operator. You're an institution. That's level 6. You are 42 years old. You own 103 doors across 68 properties. You've crossed the threshold. You are no longer a small operator. You are an institution-scale landlord. Local brokers know your name. When a deal comes up, an estate sale, a motivated seller, an off-market opportunity, they call you first. Lenders return your calls. You've done 12 deals with the same commercial banker. You get preferential rates. You're invited to speak at investor meetups. People ask how you did it. They don't believe it's as hard as you say. You've restructured everything. A director of property management, 68,000. 2 leasing agents, a maintenance team of 3, a bookkeeper, a lawyer on retainer, an insurance broker who shops your policies every year. You have quarterly reviews. You have KPIs, occupancy rate, average days to lease, maintenance cost per unit, net operating income per door. You are a CEO, gross rent, $127,300 a month. Operating expenses, $71,800 a month. Debt service, $34,100 a month. Distributable cash flow, $21,400 a month. That's $256,800 a year in cash. Your portfolio is worth approximately $14.7 million. You owe $8.9 million. You have $5.8 million in equity. By any conventional measure, you've succeeded. But here's how the system actually works at the top. You don't find deals. They're brought to you by brokers who know you can close in 21 days. You don't manage tenants. You manage managers. You don't fix toilets. Approve capital expenditure requests, and review variance reports. You've become a CEO of a small company that happens to own buildings. And here's the burden. You're on the hook for $8.9 million in debt, most personally guaranteed. If occupancy drops below 88%, if a major employer relocates, if the market turns, you don't just lose the business, you lose everything. You have 12 people on payroll who depend on you. You have 103 families living in your units. You have 4 lenders monitoring your debt service coverage ratio every quarter. One of your loans comes up for renewal. Bank up orders an appraisal and an environmental assessment. The assessment flags potential lead paint in 3 pre-1978 units. It's not a violation, it's a disclosure issue. But now the bank wants a remediation plan before they'll renew. You spend $18,000 on lead abatement. The loan gets renewed. That's the cost of staying in the game. Here's the thing nobody told you at level 1. At 103 doors, you're too big to stay small and too small to go institutional. You can't sell to a mom and pop. It's too much. You can't sell to a private equity fund. You're too small. They're buying 500-unit portfolios. You're in the middle. And the middle is where you get stuck. You could sell everything. 1031, exchange into a triple net lease property. A Walgreens, a dollar store, something with a 20-year lease where the tenant pays everything. That would be passive. But it would mean giving up control, giving up optionality, giving up the ability to operate. And you've spent 14 years learning how to operate. So you hold, you run the business, you manage the team, you monitor the debt. Late at night, you ask yourself, did you build this to own it, or did it build itself around you? You don't have an answer yet. Here's the truth nobody tells you at level 1. Rental real estate doesn't work because of appreciation, doesn't work because of cash flow. It doesn't work because of tax benefits, though those help. It works because of one thing: leverage. You borrowed $9 million to control $14.7 million in assets. You put in maybe $2, $1 million of your own capital over 14 years. The rest is other people's money. Leverage is an amplifier. It amplifies returns when things go up. It amplifies losses when they go down. The entire empire sits on a foundation of debt, and debt has a counterparty: a lender, a bank, an institution that can change terms, call loans, refuse to refinance, or adjust rates. You are not independent, are interdependent with lenders, with tenants, with employees, with contractors, with insurance companies, with city councils. The system you built is not a passive income machine. It's a capital allocation system that requires constant management, constant liquidity, constant attention. You didn't buy freedom. You bought complexity. And here's the final piece, the one that reframes everything. The people who actually win in real estate at scale aren't the ones who own the most doors. They're the ones who control the most capital. The syndicators, the fund managers, the operators who raise $40 million from passive investors and buy a 200-unit apartment complex. They take a 2% acquisition fee, $800,000 upfront, a 1.5% annual asset management fee, $600,000 a year on $40 million, and 20% of the profits when they sell. They don't own the building. They manage the money. They get paid whether the deal performs or not. You built an empire. They built a fee structure. You signed personal guarantees on $8, $9 million. They signed operating agreements with liability protection and investor capital at risk. You work 50 hours a week managing the machine. They work 50 hours a week raising the next fund. That's the game. And you only see it from the top. The question was never, how do I get to 100 doors? The question was, what am I actually building and who does it serve? If you're building it to own it, to control it, to operate it, to extract every dollar yourself, then yes, you can get to 103 doors. You can make $256,800 a year. You can build $5.8 million in equity, but you'll be inside the system every day for as long as you own it. If you're building it to sell it, to create a track record, to prove a model, to eventually hand it off to a buyer or roll it into a fund, then the 103 doors aren't the end. They're the resume, and the real money comes next. That's the turn. That's what you didn't see coming. So what does owning 103 doors actually mean? It means you built a real business. You created $5.8 million in equity, $256,800 a year in cash, in a system that employs 12 people and houses 103 families. You learned how to manage people, deploy capital, navigate debt, structure deals, and operate a portfolio most people will never attempt. But it also means you're not passive. You're not free. You're the architect of a machine that runs on your decisions, your credit, your guarantees. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the point was never to escape work. Maybe it was to choose which work you do. Maybe the point was never to be free of the system. Maybe it was to understand it well enough to build leverage inside it. There's no perfect level. Level 1 is exhausting. Level 6 is high stakes. Every door you add is a trade-off. More revenue, more risk, more equity, more exposure, more control, more responsibility. If you made it this far, you're exactly who this channel is for. A subscribe helps me keep making these. No pressure, but I'd appreciate it. Drop a comment. Which level surprised you the most? Or better yet, are you currently stuck in one of them? And if you want to see what happens when someone tries to scale past 100 doors into institutional real estate, when they stop owning and start syndicating, watch this next. Same system, different ceiling, same trap.